Well, thank you very much for the welcome. Great to join you here in person and online. And it's my pleasure to describe Emyria to you today. We're a really unique company. If you're interested in exposure to some of those macro trends Greg spoke about earlier, healthcare, biotech, digital health, you may like to listen to what we've got to say. I've even got a few tenuous mining analogies, which I'm going to try, and you can give me feedback on those later. But we're a really unique company. We're a data-driven biotech company that manages very active clinical operations as well. What does that look like? Well, we actually manage a network of medical centres around the country. We have 7 physical locations where we provide care and personalised treatment for patients with unmet needs. These patients are referred to us by their specialist or their general practitioner because nothing else is working for them right now. And we give those patients access to new treatments. We also invest heavily in our data capture architecture, and so we're collecting incredibly high quality clinical evidence on how these treatments are working for these patients. And we use that data to launch standalone drug development programs, targeting global registration. And of course, to do this well, you need to build a really terrific team of world-class experts. And we've got some terrific teammates in our company. So I'd like to highlight a few of these folks. So Sir John Took, I think the laser's up here. This gentleman was knighted for services to medicine in the United Kingdom. He's a past president of the Academy of Medical Sciences, and he's a director on our board. Next to him is Jen Morgan, a pain specialist, one of our key early referrers. And next to her, Dr. Karen Smith, chair of our strategic advisory and the ex-global head of research and development and chief medical officer of Jazz Pharmaceuticals, who'll become relevant a bit later. And amongst the mix, we also have experts in clinical psychiatry, neuropharmacology, in medicinal chemistry and data analysis, and this team has collectively been responsible for more than 20 FDA drug approvals. And with that team, we're able to tackle some really important verticals. We're going for 3 major arms. One of them is the curation of really high quality real-world evidence on how brand new treatments work. There's a market leader, Flatiron Health in the United States, was acquired for $2.1 billion, building a world-class real-world evidence data set on cancer treatments. Pharma companies can use this data to try and figure out where their treatments are working best and accelerate their drug development programs. Our data is being used to identify standalone treatment registration programs for cannabinoid therapies. We've got some really great IP on where these treatments work best, and we're developing our own novel delivery technologies as well. And thirdly, recently we've been working in MDMA-assisted therapy. There's an emerging field here where the traditional psychedelic medications, when provided alongside careful psychotherapy, can have profound benefits for patients with major mental health disorders. We're standing alone a couple of programs. We've got an MDMA-assisted therapy trial in preparation for post-traumatic stress disorder, and we're also developing our own novel MDMA analogues with a key partnership with the University of Western Australia. So let's take a look at those. What is real-world evidence? This is the evidence that's captured and gathered outside of routine clinical trials. Pharma companies can be very selective who gets on a study, very prescriptive about how those studies can run, and they can often mean that the patients on those studies don't look like real patients who turn up at the GP's office. Major regulators recognise this, and they're taking an increasing interest and, in fact, setting expectations that companies wishing to register their drugs should present evidence from the real world on how their drugs are faring. The FDA now accepts almost 75% of their applications. In fact, this number's grown at 79 now. Nearly 80% of FDA applications for registration now contain real-world evidence. And we know that companies, particularly in the United States, are being set up and very well funded to provide access to real-world evidence. Of those, none of those, however, mentioned in this table, apart from Emyria, run their own clinical operations that provide frontline access to patients. So this is our data set. So far, we've seen more than 5,000 patients, and this is growing every month across our clinical network. This is our tenement, if you will, and we drill this data for insights on what is working, for what problem, and for which patients. And those insights can then inform our own drug development programs. And they look a little bit like this. So we're now focused on taking cannabinoid treatments and turning them into true pharmaceuticals. If you've ever taken aspirin, you may be surprised to learn that that was originally extracted from the bark of the willow tree a couple of thousand years ago. If you've ever taken a statin to lower your cholesterol, that was a compound first isolated from mushrooms. In fact, you can find some of that key ingredient in the oyster mushrooms. In fact, 40% of registered drugs today, behind the pharmacist or available by prescription, actually derive from plants originally. But of course, when we go to our doctor, we're not brewing teas, we're not eating mushrooms or cooking up food. We actually take a reliable dose form, a proper pharmaceutical, and we believe that is the future of cannabinoid treatments and of course all of drug development. And one of the other great, imperatives to registered treatments is that they can generate massive returns. This improves patient access because of the reliability and the clinical evidence that supports prescribing and registration, and also reimbursement. And we can see that play out in the story of GW Pharma. They are the first company to register a cannabinoid-based treatment. They have a treatment now that's generating nearly $700 million a year from that single product, treating a rare form of epilepsy. And you can see that the revenues from that one product dwarf all of the revenues currently obtained from more than 190 unregistered products available in Australia. A key thing about GW is that they were recently acquired from Jazz Pharmaceuticals for $7.2 billion US earlier this year. And you might remember Karen Smith, chair of our strategic advisory, was the ex-chief medical officer at Jazz. What we're trying to do is isolate the purest form of cannabinoid we can. We believe that the future will be synthetic. This offers reliability, quality, stability, and cost advantages over some of the plant-derived products to date. And we believe that's going to be really crucial for approvals with major regulators like the FDA and elsewhere in the world. We have a growing patent portfolio, as I've alluded to before, informed by the real-world evidence that we've gathered. This covers both the use of these treatments, but also novel formulations as well. And two of our leading programs I'll just touch on briefly. EMD 003, targeting a Schedule 3 over-the-counter medication that would not require prescription for psychological distress and the symptoms thereof. We're also building out a program for irritable bowel syndrome. Again, a major unmet need. 11% of the population, no registered proven drug treatment for this condition. I mentioned before our MDMA-based programs. So MDMA, otherwise known as ecstasy, is now under review to be rescheduled from Schedule 9 in Australia to Schedule 8. That decision will be made by the TGA in December this year. That's the same shift that happened to medicinal cannabis back in 2016. Around the world, huge amounts of investor interest in this emerging field, driven by, one, a recognition of the major challenges of major mental health disorders, and of course the incredible promising research that's starting to emerge about how psychedelic-assisted therapy can help patients with those conditions. We have two programs in this space. One is an analog development program where we're taking the ecstasy molecule, making slighter changes to it to elicit different kinds of responses in the human body. So therefore we can diminish some of the side effects and amplify some of the more desirable qualities. This library is built on 10 years of research at the UWA, and we've got more than 100 analogues that we're currently screening for neuroreceptor activity. In addition, we're also planning an MDMA-assisted therapy trial for patients with major post-traumatic stress disorder. That protocol is currently under review by the major organisation MAPS, who have led the most successful phase 3 studies in this treatment domain. And our therapists are currently completing their training for that as well. We expect to get that commenced next year. Finally, just a quick touch on the clinical impact we're having as well. We see a huge range of patients where nothing else has worked. We did a really great study recently with IQVIA and Nostra data, looking back in time, 12 months before these patients came to see us, and had a look at these patients who are on, and looked at their opioid levels. And many of these patients were on massive doses of opioid. You and I would feel the effects if we were taking maybe about 60 milligrams a day. These patients were on more than 150. And we could see that that trend had not changed for 12 months until they started treatment with us, when that dropped precipitously around 30% on average in just 6 months. So we know we're having an impact, and if we can find out what dose works for which problem and in which patient population, we can get a registered treatment out for these patients and they can have an alternative to this current treatment. So why invest? Here's our capital structure. We've got 250 million shares on issue. Currently $4.5 million cash in the bank, with 1.1 due from an R&D refund next month. Gives us an enterprise value about 58 million. About 60% of our shares are owned by the top 20, with the directors holding almost 30% of our shares. And then I'll just give you 6 reasons to invest. The proprietary real-world evidence that's uniquely ours, more than 5,000 patients, a huge amount of investment in the platform that supports that data capture. We've got a unique cannabinoid delivery platform and unique insights on where these treatments work best, and we're chasing registration with the FDA and the TGA for those. We have exposure into the psychedelic assisted therapy through our MDMA analog development program and the assisted therapies that we're leading over the next year. We've got a terrific team of global experts who have done this before, who have had success with FDA registration, and they're supporting our team. We've got a national clinical network, which gives us access to patients, referring clinicians, and we can use those patients and work with them to support our drug development. And I think we're grossly undervalued given the verticals that we're chasing and our upside that's coming. So thank you for your time. Please check out the website for more information and the extended bios on our team as well. Thank you very much.